Hi, welcome to Bravo School of English Grammar, and I thought I'll just make my exercise a little bit different today. Instead of learning the grammar of English, let's just see the difference of English words used in Britain compared to American, because you do come across when you speak English language it's spoken differently from two different countries. The language is the same, the grammar is the same, but why do they use it differently? Because they just want to be different. I think that's the only reason it can be. And British, they are very like the language was discovered by them obviously, so they are very traditional. They don't change. They don't adapt anything new. That's British people for you. Americans want to be totally different from, they just want to be different from British people. They just want to use their own words. And if you're a traveler, this will become very useful to you, because you'll be wondering why the words are different when we are reading it in English textbooks, and why are they used differently in America when you travel or to any western part of the world. So I thought I'll just do this little exercise which will be interesting for you. It's very light-hearted one, so you don't need to concentrate too much, but it's very interesting to know that we use the same word in two different spellings, two different words mean the same in one. So let me just go through a few common words that you might come across and take it and see what's the difference on them. Okay, I've got a few words here today, the most common words that I could think about. So taking a petrol. Now we use petrol for, it's almost used everywhere in the world, but if you go to Canada, if you go to America, see the Canadians, they follow the American system, because they are sort of next country. So I think they are so much more influenced by the Americans. So it says gas station. So you would wonder, like if you're a traveler and you have not heard this phrase before, you will be getting totally confused, because you used to petrol as a word, but they use it as gas. So it's good to be aware of how the words are used differently in other countries, so that you're aware of it, like when you're traveling or reading about it, that it means the same. Second one, autumn. It's one of the seasons, as you know, but the Americans and the Canadians will call it fall. The reason they call it fall is that's when the leaves are falling down. So it does make sense. Gas also makes sense because it's a liquid format, right? So here it's when it comes to fall, the leaves are falling, so that they want to keep it simple as fall. So the British want to keep it more traditional way of spring, summer, autumn and winter, and they want to just be a little bit different because it's fall. So it sounds very fashionable as well. Americans like a lot of fashion. They want to be the leaders in everything that they want to discover. English don't want to change. They're very conservative, traditional people who will stick to what they are. Like if you take the note pounds, English pounds, it's still remaining pounds, even though they are within the European community, they are not willing to change to the euros. So that's how they are. They even keep the measurements in the old fashions. A lot of things, hasn't changed. And take the car. You still drive on the right hand side in Britain, whereas everywhere else in the Europe, you'll be driving on the left hand side, including America, Canada and all the European countries. They don't want to change. So it's like, you can see they're very conservative people who want to stick to what they believe in. Boot. Boot is the car boot. They'll call it trunk, because the shape of the boot, if you take it, it really is the shape of a trunk. So it does make sense why they want to call it trunk, but British will call it the boot. But if you went to America or Canada, any part of that world, you'll be seeing it as drugstore. Yes, it does make sense because it is a drug. It's a drug that is given to you to cure your disease or your pain or whatever you are in. So they call it drugstore. Cupboard. Everything, where we store something, we'll call it cupboard, they'll call it closet. It's mainly used, closet word is for the clothes, but still they'll call it closet. So if you went there and somebody said, oh, go and get my towel from the closet, then you'll be standing there thinking, what does he mean? He means take it from my cupboard. Because if you see, because England introduced English, you would see that most of the places in the world will follow the English system. But Americans and the Canadians, they just like to follow their own system. Flat. So they call it flat. American will call it apartment. It's the same. And they have another one which we don't have in England. They have another one which is called, apart from apartment, between apartment and house, it's a middle one which is called condominium. Now they will want to make things more difficult, because flat is smaller. Condominium is a little bit bigger than flat, smaller than the house. But in England, you don't find that word condominium, and it's not. They either built flats or they build houses. Lift, they'll call it elevator. So you won't even see this word lift written anywhere. So, you know, you are a traveler, again, you know, you are traveling to US and you're sort of saying, you know, I'm looking for the lift, and they would not understand it. So you'll be seeing the sign elevator. So it's good to see the difference of the words and to be aware of it, what they are, so that, you know, you are not lost when you're traveling in a foreign country where they use the terms a little bit differently. Nappy, what we use on babies, they'll call it diaper. So you won't, you know, if you go to a drugstore, they call it the drugstore, and ask for a nappy, they will say, sorry, I don't follow you, because they only know it as diaper. Pavement, the walking pavement, they'll call it the sidewalk, because it's a side of the road. So it's not that the words that they have changed doesn't mean sense, it does mean sense, but they just want to be different. Rubbish, we'll call it rubbish, they'll call it trash, because, you know, you're throwing the trash into the bin. So this is some of the words. I can go on and on, but no, there's a limit to how much I also can explain. So if you really like, you know, want to know more about it, you know, it's available on the websites, that, you know, if you want to travel and you just want to be aware of the words, you know, so do a bit of homework before you go further with it. And I hope this mini little exercise, which is not too tiring to like some of the ones we have taken before. So this is just like in a simple exercise that we have taken, but it still be a useful one for you, because I'm sure you will come across this in your daily life. Okay, we compared in the previous exercise, we compared some words which were used in Britain, totally different from by the Americans. Now we are going to go and look at the spelling. Now this is even getting worse now, because when you're looking at the words which are said differently, itself is so confusing. Now when you see the spelling of it, it's totally confusing, because you would like, you know, I'll take the first example, behavior. Now most of the countries that had been influenced by the British will continue to follow the British style of English. So wherever the Britain has been in the past and ruled, they would have left their traces behind, and we follow them religiously. Now the Americans, it was a country that was discovered by themselves, and they formed their own syllabus in everything they do. So if you look at it like, you know, they would be spelling the same word behavior with V-I-O-U-R, it finishes. They would omit U. Wherever it is possible, they would take off the U, because if you take it, the U letter, it is silent. So behavior, the same word here, behavior, V-I-O-U-R, it finishes with the correct sound, behavior. You don't need the U, because that is totally silent. So they look at it, they say, why do you have to take on a spelling which doesn't need to be there and it's silent? It doesn't make sense. Yes, logically it doesn't make sense, but then we are used to the British system. So if you are used to the British system and British spelling that you have been taught at school, you would get totally confused when you travel to the other part of the US. You will be thinking, you know, why is the U missing? And you might even misunderstand it for a different language. So this is a confusion they love to create. So I think, you know, if you need to travel or you need to work between the British and the American firms, it's very important. Say for example, if you are a proofreader or you do a lot of business between both the nations, you're going to get totally confused, because you'll get a letter from them which will have this spelling, and you are used to a letter that you would write back with that spelling. Both of them are correct. Logically they are correct, but in the grammatical side we know which one is correct. So this is a problem that you will face. So, you know, you really have to be aware of how they spell to you. So, but there's in the website, if you go, you know, there will be a lot of words that you can see which are spelled totally different. Check. The check we write to the bank. Check. C-H-E-Q-U-E is how a British person will spell C-H-E-C-K. Now we are used to this check when we are checking for delivery note, we are checking for something, but they would use the same spelling for the checkbook as well, because they think, you know, this U is not important, this Q and U doesn't make sense. Check, C-H-E-C-K, the same sound, but why should we have to use it this way? So that's how they would use, so be aware of that as well. Now color, C-O-L-O-U-R, they would omit the U, C-O-L-O-R. So you would see the words that comes with U, most of the time it won't be there when an American is spelling it. Center, C-E-N-T-R-E. They would use C-E-N-T-E-R. Center. If you break it into syllables, you know, it does make sense. Center. But here, center. But if you take this pronunciation of R, it should really pronounce it as center. But it's not so. So it's very confusing, but please be aware of how it's done if you need to be using both the countries or both the language, both their spellings, you know, in your profession. Theatre. With a T-R-E, they would use it with T-E-R, because T, the sound T, it finishes properly here, but the sound T-R-E will be tr. But that's how the British will spell. Labour. Labour. Again, U is missing. Program. A Briton will say additional M-E, program. They would say program because if you see program, why is an M-E necessary? It's not necessary. So what I have understood is Americans like to keep things very simple and modern. British are very conservative and traditional. So this is the difference between, and that's where they clash in some areas too. Catalog. The books we looked for to buy something, you know, catalog. They would say catalog because it's a catalog. It still makes sense. Aeroplane. They will say airplane. So this is a few words, and if you go to the site, you will see loads of words, you know, which are commonly used. So, you know, it's interesting to know how it's done in different parts of the world, especially in the West. So, you know, I thought this exercise will be quite interesting because, you know, most of us don't know why things are done differently, but we have to accept it because that's how it's done. Okay, now we have seen the word differences between American and the British. We have seen the spelling difference between British and the American. Now we are going to be seeing how they write the sentences differently or how they speak differently. So the three examples here, have you already eaten is how a Britishman would ask you. Just when he wants to know whether you have had your dinner or have you had your food, he would say, have you already eaten? But an American will say, did you eat already? So the thing that changes is the verb and the verb form, how they use it. So its more present form is how the British would, and more kind of a past form is how an American would speak. Have you phoned her yet? Would be a British English. Did you phone her yet will be the American English. Now there is no argument which is right, which is wrong. It's just the way that they practice the language. So the Britishman, as I said to you before, very orthodox and quite old-fashioned people would not change anything. They would not adapt to anything new. But the Americans are very modern and they just want to simplify things. They don't want to be too formal when they talk to you. See, you know, here it's very formal. Have you phoned her yet? Care about the grammar too much. They don't really concentrate too much on the grammatical English. See here, have you phoned her yet? That's very passive way of putting it. Did you phone her yet? Did you phone her yet? So it's like, you know, simpler. They just want to be simple and sweet. Here, have you ever been to Canada? But American will say, did you ever go to Canada? So it's when you listen to it, like, you know, you can see this is more polite and passive way, and this is more straightforward and talking English. So there is a lot more to this, like in a lot of sentences that you can see in the website of ours. So when you want to, like, you know, learn about the difference between English and the American, please do go through the website and you will see the words, the spelling, grammar, punctuations, and a lot of things that will be there in details, which will be quite self-explanatory. So you can sit there and there will be comparisons, so you can figure it out yourself, which is not that difficult. It will be useful to somebody who wants to travel to that part of the world, because otherwise you get totally confused, you know, with English, which is right. There's no rights and wrongs, but it's just the way it's been practiced. So please go through the website in details to get more information if you like, and thank you so much for watching this mini little exercise that I presented to you through Bravo School of English. Thank you.